Hello and welcome to everyone joining us for this AMSA Town Hall session. It's 8 o'clock Eastern Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We'd like to give a warm welcome to all of you joining us for tonight's Town Hall session on fundraising. Before we get started, we're going to go over a bit of housekeeping. So first, please note that we have placed everyone on mute to help control audio quality. Next, we will leave time at the end of the session for questions and answers. Please submit your questions via the Q&A box throughout the presentation. You may need to click on the Q&A icon in the top right corner in order for the box to become visible. This may also be the case with the chat boxes. So just kind of make sure you get familiar with the program you're in, and you can find those Q&A boxes and those chat boxes, submit questions, and then I will field them at the end. Lastly, we are recording today's session so we can make it available on the AMSA website. So if you know somebody that wasn't able to join us, feel free to let them know. We'll have it online within the next couple of weeks. Now, with the housekeeping out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get back to today's topic, which is fundraising. Funding is both a huge opportunity and it can also be a huge challenge for many chapters. So don't feel like you're alone. And that's why we wanted to spend a little time on that particular topic today. We'll also spend some time chatting about financial basics as a whole. But before we dive into the meat of the session, let me go ahead and introduce myself and our speaker. I'm Noreen Rich, and I'll be moderating tonight's session. I'm the Director of Membership for AMSA, and I'm thrilled that we can provide new resources like these town hall sessions to you and our other members. Always feel free to contact me if you have any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll put you in touch with somebody that does or find the answer for you. Again, my contact information is just listed there as nrich@amsa.org, and like I said, contact me anytime you have any sort of questions. As for tonight's main speaker, Joshua Caulfield is AMSA's Executive Director, and he'll be sharing some of his fundraising do's and don'ts throughout his presentation. Joshua has a double major in marketing and economics, and he also received an MBA from American University in Washington, D.C. Throughout his undergraduate and graduate years, he had firsthand experience organizing and founding a number of student organizations. So he's faced the same challenges many of you are facing today, and he's got some great first-person perspective that'll give you some tips on fundraising. Throughout Joshua's career, he has led marketing efforts for the third largest trade show in the United States, launched a for-profit .com subsidiary, which received over $7 million in startup funding. He served as the Chief Staff Officer for the American Institute of Architecture students, and he even taught collegiate-level courses in marketing here at Northern Virginia Community College as an adjunct faculty member. Joshua has extensive experience in nonprofit management and working with organizations that need financial guidance. He's well-versed in the challenges and opportunities of students and places great emphasis on building value for them in organizations just like AMSA. So without further delay, I'm going to hand the session over to Joshua, and he's going to go ahead and take you through his presentation.
One of the things that I really wanted to do with these town hall type sessions is to begin providing additional resources and additional opportunities for training and educational opportunities for you as the chapter leaders. Without the chapters, AMSA is nothing. You are the focus of our entire organization, and it is one of my passions, duties, responsibilities, and goals to make sure that each and every one of you is prepared for the challenges that you have ahead. The first thing I want to talk about tonight is fundraising, and this comes directly from a lot of questions that I have been receiving from various chapter leaders around the country, and frankly also our international chapter leaders. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Our chapters are trying to figure out, how can I do the things that I want to do in my chapter? How can we have meetings where people will attend? How can we do community service and philanthropic outreach products? How can we do educational pieces? How can I get good speakers? How can I send people to convention? How can I? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have funds in your organization, it makes it ridiculously hard for you to be able to do your job and provide high-quality programming at the chapter level for your organization. So what I want to do here today, right now, is talk about some very fundamental, low-level fundraising techniques that work. I was in your shoes many moon ago when I used to run my, I ran a drama society, and I ran my undergraduate chapter of my fraternity, and in graduate school I was part of the Student Government Association and a variety of other pieces where we had fundraising opportunities. So I've been in your seat. Now I will tell you, our single most successful fundraising tactic during my undergraduate time was selling pizza. We would go out and we would buy a pizza. And actually, we would end up, it got to the point where we were buying 50 pizzas at a time, and we were selling pizza slices for a lower price than you would pay if you were doing the entire pizza, and we would deliver it to your door on campus. Now, that probably isn't going to work for many of your organizations, but I point that out because these are the types of things that may come up, and you need to embrace the things that work. So as I go through some ideas and some thoughts in how you can pursue fundraising, I really want you to understand that just because I say something is likely to work means it may not be implementable on your campus. So take the idea, modify it to fit your needs, your desires, and your resources, because you may not have 8 people willing to go around to different dorms with 3 or 4 pizzas each and just knock on doors. It may not be a successful way for you to go about doing things. And I have other things besides pizza to talk about. Although, come on, let's be honest, pizza is a pretty good thing to talk about. So talking about fundraising from a starting point, fundraising gets a bad rap because ultimately at the end of the day, it's sales. And nobody likes to call or send a letter or do outreach to students, to faculty, to administration, to other supporters. Why? Because we get rejected, because people say no. And at the end of the day, fundraising is going to be for you, just like it is for everybody else in the world, a numbers game. You have to ask in order to get funds. And you have to ask a large number of people, because most of those people are going to say no. But the few people that say yes are going to end up being the thing that causes your fundraising to be successful. I want to help you get over the stigma of fundraising. I want to help you turn fundraising into something that can be fun. It's not going to be the greatest joy of your life, but it's something that can be something you cannot fear and that you can actually get a kick out of. I want to offer you an understanding of how fundraising works in the real world and on your campus. I want to provide you with some proven techniques to help minimize your rejection and increase your results. And I want to empower you with some practical advice on things like, well, what should I charge, and who should I ask, and how many times is it okay for me to reach out? So at the end of the day, I want to offer you this HOPE, these HOPE, for your fundraising techniques. Fundraising. What is money? I'm not going to go into the whole economic definition of money, but at the end of the day, money is a way for people to engage in your chapter and to show their support. It is also a way for you to measure the success of some of your events and programs. It is also the resource that you use to pay off the people who support you and to reward those members who give of themselves to make the chapter work. What you need to think about and the questions you need to ask is who is interested in giving you money? Why would they be interested in giving you money? How can you get that money? and how can you show your appreciation for it? One thing that I want you to consider and keep at the very top of your mind is that there is one thing, one single most important thing that you and every member of your team need to do in order to have successful fundraising. You cannot have successful fundraising without this one thing. This one thing is you must ask. If you don't ask for money, people won't know that you need it. People won't know that they have an opportunity to contribute. People won't know how much you need. People won't know what you're going to use it for. You have to ask. And the way in which you frame the ask is critical, because that's what causes people to give. A little further down in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about why people give. And at the end of the day, fundraising for chapters of most associations, and specifically for AMSA chapters, is about an emotional give-back reaction. We're going to talk about some things where people are actually buying some things from your organization. I'll get to that. That's not quite so emotionally based, but many of the requests that you're going to send out on a regular basis are things that are going to trigger an emotional response in the person who has the resources to give, and you want to tap that so that they feel good about giving you the funds that they're giving you. Let's talk about potential sources of revenue, because the first thing you need to think about is, where am I going to go to get this funding? The first thing to think about are the bad choices. The people who are already giving you money, members. They may already be paying local dues. They've certainly paid national dues their first year in. Your family, your friends. These are not really good choices. They're simple. They're the ones we know most often. They're the ones we reach out to most often. And that's why these are the ones that are not great choices for consistent fundraising. I'm not saying don't reach out to your friends, to your family, to your members, and ask them to give, but you already are in a variety of different ways. So avoid those people. Go on to other choices. Let's talk about the department. Let's talk about the dean of your medical school, or the dean of your undergraduate program, or the directors, or the recruitment office, or the alumni services office, or the student government, or even other student groups. And let's talk a little bit about why these people might give you some funding. Let's start with the deans and directors of your either pre-med or your medical school. Why would they want to give you money? A huge part of their mandate is to ensure your success at the school. And they do not measure and evaluate success solely by your grades and your GPA. Clearly, that's a measure your school uses. Clearly, that's important. But what's also important is making sure that people stay engaged, that people don't drop out of school. Colleges at every level and in every discipline, including medicine, have a challenge in keeping their students on what's called the professional path. They have a problem having people come in and spend typically 4 years in undergraduate and 4 years in medical school. I am confident that everyone who is listening to this presentation, whether it's the recording or whether it is live, knows somebody who's going through either their undergraduate program or their graduate program, medical school, and is taking longer than the traditional 4 years for a variety of different reasons. I am also confident that every single person here knows someone who didn't make it through. I knew several. Some of them went back, some of them never did. But the schools are dedicated, and the deans and directors of your programs at every level are dedicated to keeping these students engaged. your AMSA chapter is a way in which you keep the student engaged. Because one of the biggest reasons for people failing out, leaving, or taking too long to graduate, and too long is a pejorative statement, and I don't mean it in that way, I just mean longer than the typical norm, okay, is because of burnout. Because all they end up focusing in on is classes, classes, classes. We have a saying at AMSA, of course, and that's it's more than just classwork, it's more than just education, it's more than just grades that makes a great physician. That's what AMSA is all about. And so by approaching your departments and asking them for funding for speaker series, for social events, for chapter meetings, for field trips, these types of things where you get the community together, and particularly when you can do outreach or when you can bring education from a non-specifically medical or educational programming that's already being covered in the scholarship curriculum, if you can bring in these additional things, then the dean is very interested in engaging with you and having you run this type of program. Because these are the things that they turn around and reflect back up to the president and trustees of the college. So I cannot encourage you enough to start thinking about creating a relationship with the deans and directors of your program. In the administration of your school, you also will typically have a student activities department and a student government association. Of course, administratively, the student activities department is a professional group run by people who are hired by the school, and the SJ is typically a student-run organization. I'm going to talk about these two things separately. The student activities group is in charge of creating activities for students. Wow, go figure. It's not like it's in the name or anything. But this particular group is designed to actually create this additional programming outside of the classroom that keeps people engaged. If you can develop a relationship with these groups, they can provide you with funding and resources to be able to pursue your goals on and off campus. So go to them, get to know them, tell them what your plans are for the year, and provided you are willing to open up those programs in some way, shape, or form to non-AMSA members as well, they can be a phenomenal resource for you. The Student Government Association can also be a resource in the same way, but one of the things that the Student Government Association typically has that's different is access to the activities fee. Every college tuition, if you look at your tuition statement, you will see somewhere on your tuition statement some sort of fee that is for activities. It is typically labeled student activities fee, but sometimes it's hidden and it's called something else. In my particular, both undergraduate and graduate, it was $75. I'm sure it's probably more than that now for each and every one of you. But this is a fee that comes from every student and goes into a pool of money. In most institutions, that fee is then given out to the Student Government Association to be used to fund activities across the campus. Bring in speakers, bands, having social events, having things like Earth Day, having celebrations, having educational activities, all kinds of variety of different things. It is very standard on most campuses that organizations registered with that campus can get access to that activities fee. All you have to do is ask. And there is typically a group within the Student Government Association, usually run by the treasurer, that handles all of that type of money. There's most likely a process that you have to go through in order to apply for and then get accepted for these funds. You will want to go and meet with the treasurer of your SGA and find out if you can access that money and what the process is for you to go through. Okay, so setting those aside, what other good choices are there for you to reach out and get money? There are alumni of your chapter, not only local, but probably nationwide. People who were in AMSA while they were in school, who are now out, and who are now making their own money and making their own way in the world. I encourage you to try and find those people. If you're having a challenge finding those people, please contact the national office. We are trying to work on creating an alumni database, and we have a fair amount of contact information. We are happy to share that with you. I'm going to talk a little bit later about creating a letter and some outreach programs in order to contact those people, because you want to contact them in a very special way. In addition, look at local firms. When you are on campus, where are the places that you guys are, are all going to buy things, whether it's food, whether it's academic supplies, whether it's supplies for medical school and training? Is there a local clothing shop? Is there a mall? Where is it that people are going to buy things on campus? Because those types of local stores and firms that are engaged with the student body on campus, they want to get in front of students, and they are willing most times to support you. I'm going to talk about how you can approach them for what's called an in-kind donation. So it's a donation of something that's not money, but you should also ask them for funds. And many times you will be surprised that they are absolutely willing to support you, especially if they can get some recognition for it and some promotion on campus. So keep in mind, local firms, local supply stores. I talked a little bit about funding from your school. Go to the dean, go to the director, go to the student activities office. Also consider going to the admissions office, especially if you have a graduate program in your school. The graduate admissions department is constantly looking for ways to tap people who are undergraduates and who are interested in going into other departments. Many of our people in medical school are pursuing dual degrees. Some are in history, some are in business, some are in law. You can go to the graduate departments of these other disciplines within your school and talk to them about approaching pre-med and undergraduate students. And my commitment to each chapter is that if your school's department, any of your school's departments are willing to fund to sending you to convention to the tune of at least $500, we will allow them to bring through you promotional materials for their graduate programs that we will stuff into the bags so that you have something to offer them. Contact us at the national office. I'll explain the program a little bit more, and we'll have some information up on the website in the fundraising department area, which we are putting up over the course of the next 3 weeks. You want to go to your school. Go to that SGA group. These are clear and easy ways to go and get funding. Let me be honest, though. You're not going to get a yes the first time. You might get a maybe. You'll probably get a no. Go back. You are going to have to ask for funds from every source multiple times. In marketing, it typically takes up to 14 times for someone to acknowledge your request. In direct sales, which is what you're going to be doing, it's typically more between the lines of 6 and 8 requests. Don't take your first no as the final response. Expect the first no and go for the second or third. When you do requests for donations, we are going to talk a little bit further about how to reach out for those. You always want to have a physical letter. You always want to have a written letter, a written request. Even if you're walking in person to the dean, the director, the SGA, whoever's office, you will want to have a written request for the funding. That written request should thank them for their support in the very first paragraph. Then It should have the request for what you're actually looking to get, how much you're actually asking for, where those funds will be used, and why that should be important to the person that you are talking to. We will have template letters that give you examples on how to write these and put these together in the fundraising department that we'll have up on the website. Provide products, events, and services that people are willing to buy. I'm going to talk about that at the end in the second half of this presentation. I want you to think about the value proposition. This is where I'm talking about the product. Now, when I say product, it doesn't have to be a physical thing because you're not a manufacturing firm. It's not like you're out developing widgets and trying to sell these on the street corner. But you do have products. For example, think of the things that you want to do on campus this year. Do you want to have a speaker series? Do you want to have social events? Do you want to have a New Year's Eve ball? Do you want to have a gala dinner? Do you want to have some kind of a silent auction or some sort of other special event? This is your product. It's not necessarily a tangible thing, but this is what I mean when we call product. Think about the things that you do and think about the things that you have to sell, okay? And think about the value proposition that you have. What is it that you are offering and why should someone care? Okay, so if you are running a social event, for example, and you want to invite people, you want to make sure that the value proposition that you're offering is tailored to the individual. No individual is exactly the same. Does your Facebook page look like anybody else's? Of course not. Is your school like any other school? No. Each person that you approach, whether it's the dean, whether it's another student, whether it's an outside firm, is different and unique. And so the approach that you're going to want to take with these people is different and unique. You want to understand why they are going to be interested in giving you funds. So for example, when you go to the dean, have them sponsor the same social event that we're going to talk about in all three of these cases. This social event, let's pretend it's going to be a dance. Let's pretend we're going to have snacks. We're going to have a non-alcoholic bar available, and we're going to have, some music. It's just some good times. It's relaxing. It's going to be on a Friday, and it's going to be a great social event. Why would the school want to fund this? Well, the school will want to fund this because it's a really good way for students to come together and bond outside of the classroom. It's a really good way for the students to let off some steam, to relax, to be able to recharge their batteries so that they can come back to the educational classwork on Monday recharged and ready to go. It is a really good way for students to feel engagement on campus and feel a connection with the school outside of their academic curriculum. These are three things that the dean's going to be very interested in. And invite that person. Invite her to come to the dance. Invite him to come and spend a little time meeting your group and socializing and speaking. Perhaps, depending upon the nature and style of the dance itself, perhaps they want to get up and just say a few words. Not give a lecture, not do a class, but to get up and say, hey, we really appreciate having you as part of the campus experience. This dance, this social event is really part of what we want you to think of when you look back on your college experience, whether it was for medical school or whether it was for undergrad. Now, talking to students, it's going to be a very different pitch, isn't it? Because it's going to be, hey, let's get together and have some fun. Hey, we're going to have some great music. Hey, there's going to be some really awesome people there. Hey, come and have a good time. Let your hair down or let yourself loose. Have a good time. And charge them. Now you're asking the school for a donation, a large donation, to underwrite the program. You're asking the individual participants for a much smaller piece, maybe $5, $7, $10 to come to the dance. All right? We'll talk about pricing and structures in a moment, but think about that. All right? And think about how you promote it. Then off campus, is there, in particular in this situation, is there a DJ that is willing to donate their services for either a reduced or free cost in order to get their name known on campus so that they can get more business? Is there a food or beverage place that's willing to pony up food and drinks at a reduced or free cost in order to get the exposure? Look for ways in which they can engage and look for ways in which they could be sponsors. Are they willing to spend maybe $500 to have a banner put up that says, hey, buy your CDs. If you like the music here, come buy your CDs at wherever. Now, granted, CDs are probably something that's not really, I'm showing my age here, but, you understand where I'm going. Find ways to tie in the outside community and offer them an opportunity to support you and give you funding. Don't just think of the obvious, well, we're going to charge for people to come to the dance. You can have sponsors and underwriters, and that's where the majority of your funding is going to come from. Again, reach out to the Student Government Association and open this up to the entire campus. Match the product and the value to the customer. Many of your supporters, when you reach out to alumni in particular, when you reach out to hospitals, local hospital administrations, when you reach out, think broadly. Think wide. Think of the people who you interact with on the street. Think of the government offices. Think of your local town hall. Is the mayor of the town that you're in interested in supporting you? Because let me tell you, you bring a lot of funds into their city. How about the governor of the state? Why not write them a letter? Why not, in fact, set up a series of 6 letters and send them out once a week asking them for funds until they say no? There's real value for them in having doctors who want to stay in the area. And when you pitch the value of what you have to offer to the customer and you think about why they would care, you'll be amazed at how much funding you can get. Let's talk about price. This is one that always throws people. And I'm not talking just students. This one throws professionals. This one throws people who have been doing whatever their business is for years and years. I have been working in the association arena for 17 years, and I've worked with over a dozen different industries, not just organizations, but industries. And it amazes me how many companies, organizations, and associations do not understand pricing. So the first rule of pricing, find out how much it costs you to deliver whatever it is they're buying. If you're doing a social, let's take a speaker series. You're going to do a speaker series. You're going to have 6 speakers come on campus. You've reached out to these different speakers, and you know that each of these speakers is willing to speak for free. You've also found that you can get a room on your campus for free through the Student Activities Office. Awesome. So there's no cost there. You still want people to show up. So what are you going to put in the back of the room? I told you we'd be talking about pizza all night. So you're going to talk food in the back of the room, some food and some beverage. That will get people there. They'll come in, they'll sit down, they'll see the speaker. Okay, they'll have a good time. How much is that food and beverage going to cost you? Then, do you have to pay anything else? Do you have to pay for AV? Do you have to pay for handouts and flyers? Did you have to print anything to, maybe you did posters on campus, or maybe you did mailbox stuffers, or whatever. Did you have to pay to market this event? You will want to incorporate all those expenses. Did somebody have to drive to pick stuff up? their gas should be incorporated in what you're expecting to spend on this event, even if, you know, they don't normally ask you to be reimbursed. You should think about that. That is your bottom line. That tells you how much you're spending, and your price needs to cover that. Then you need to start thinking about how much more do I want to make, and that will begin to tell you where your pricing starts. Then you begin to look at, okay, so I know that it's costing me $5 a person for people to show up. If I'm doing a 6-speaker series, then that's going to be $30 per person over the course of the series. If I look around and I talk to some of the students, I find out, you know what, hey, it's going to be, people are going to be willing to come because I've got some pretty good speakers and I'm giving them food, they'd be willing to spend up to $50, okay, to be fed and have this speaker series. So suddenly that becomes your price point, $50, because it covers your costs, it gives you a bonus, and you know people are willing to pay it. If you find that people are not willing to pay even the $30, then you need to either reevaluate your cost structure, find a way to get things for less. Maybe you don't offer food, and you see how it goes from there, and you only charge $5 for the speaker series because your costs are now zero, except for the time and energy that you're putting in, that you're willing to volunteer. These are the things that you do to evaluate and change your pricing structure. I hope that that makes sense. In addition, you're going to want to use the price to help drive your other things. So for example, what's the most important thing about chapters? I said chapters are the most important thing about AMSA. Well, what's the most important thing about a chapter? Members. If you don't have members, you don't have a chapter. So how do we drive membership? Well, if the speaker series becomes very successful and everybody wants to get in on it, maybe members come for free, or maybe members come for $30 and everybody else comes for $50. That's a $20 saving if you're a member, or it's a $50 savings if you can find a way to do it for them for free. Suddenly you have made the value of membership in AMSA worth an actual dollar amount that they can point to. That will help you when it comes time to do your tabling and your recruiting, I promise you. When you ask for money in your letters, when you go to your department, your schools, when you go to your outside firms, when you go to your alumni and other supporters, you want to ask them for a specific amount, and you want to tell them how much you need. But you should always try and give them options. You should always say, hey, we really need, I'm going to make up a number, $500 in order to be able to send one of our students to the national convention this year. Do you think you could do that? If you can't do that, could you at least give us $350 in order to be able to pay the registration fee? If you can't do that, could you at least give us $100 so that we would be able to pay for the gas that it's going to take to drive to Washington, D.C. this year? You will be amazed at how often people choose the middle road. They typically don't choose the high road because we've set the stake there, and it doesn't matter whether I ask for $1,000, $500, or $100 as my high mark. People will very generally go towards that middle mark. So think about that as you're developing your pricing points. Try and do the high higher than what you think you can get. Try and do the middle mark slightly below what you think you can get. And then do the low mark what you really, really need. And if they can't even do the low mark, then send them the letter again, because they've basically said no, and send them the letter again and ask again. Because as I said, you're going to get a series of no's, and it's okay to keep asking until they tell you to stop asking. And then when they tell you to stop asking, you'll wait a year and you'll give it to somebody else, and that next president can start asking again. Because there's nothing wrong with asking for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for this green contribution to your organization. You're trying to do good work. Have a good idea, though, of what they can afford. Finally, we're going to connect with them where they are. Do not ever ask for money over Facebook. You will not get a good response. Do not use your email to send out a series of letters that are generic to this 100-person list that you're asking for $100 each. Do not do it. If you are asking for more than $5, please take the time to at least print out and hand sign a letter that requests that money. If you have to spend the 32, 36, 38, 50 cents that it takes to get your letter over to this person, it's going to be worth it. It's a good investment. Promotion and communications are the key. Tell them what you need the money for. Tell them why you need it from them, because nobody else is going to give us this. Tell them what they get. They always get something, even if it's just the satisfaction of giving. Ask them to give. Small charges provide big returns. If you have a speaker series that you can pull off for a zero cost, which many of you can, if you don't know the alumni in your area who could be good speakers, please contact the national office. We will help put you in touch with those people. Find a 6-speaker series, set it up so that it doesn't cost you anything, and charge non-members $5 a speaker, and you will have $30 at the end. If you get 50 people to do this, you will end up with $1,500. More likely, if you charge $5 for non-members to attend and $0 for members to attend, more likely you'll end up with 25 new members and $750. Even that is a huge win. Small charges, especially when you are looking to charge other students to attend or engage with your chapter in activities, can provide big returns. But you have to recognize that that's the amount that they can afford. Do not be afraid to ask non-members to pay. Always have a non-member rate that is different than the member rate, because it shows the value of membership and it can help generate funds for the organization. Begin at the end. Think about how much you need. Put a budget together for the year. What are the events you're going to do over the course of the year? How are you going to engage? What are the things that require funding? What are the things that require people? What are the travel opportunities? Are you going to national convention? Are you doing philanthropic outreach? Do you want t-shirts for the chapter? What do you want? How do you do? Et cetera, et cetera. Put that plan together, create a budget around it, and that will give you your goal to go ahead and do your outreach. When you do your outreach, fundraising cannot be the job of one person. Fundraising cannot be someone's job. It has to be a team effort. You have to have a willingness on the part of your entire executive board and other members of the chapter to be willing to help write these letters, send them out, make phone calls, walk door to door, knock on the dean's office, et cetera, and do these things as a team. Because if you ask yourself and you get rejection, it's hard to get up and go ask the next. And when you get 10 rejections in a row, it crushes you. It makes it really difficult. But when you have a buddy, when you have a co-pilot, when you have a wingman or woman, okay, when you have that team together and you're going out as a pair or as a group or trio or whatever it is, okay, it's much easier. It's much easier to ask, it's much easier to convince them to give, and it's much easier to weather the rejection. Put that together and then have the person who's in charge of fundraising, because you do want to have that person, they need to be a leader. They need to say, this is our plan for fundraising, and they need to help hold each other accountable. I'm going to skip the advanced tactics because we're running low on time, but I really want to highlight the two most important things about fundraising. The first is you have to ask. If you don't ask, people will not give you money. And then you have to thank them. Always, always, always send letters of thank you to all of your sponsors, whether they gave you $50, whether they give you $500. Always thank you, because next year when you ask again, that's what they're going to remember. Noreen, this concludes my presentation, and I believe we might have had a couple of questions.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and just take the presenter role back from you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So in addition to any questions that people may be submitting via the Q&A dialog box or the chat feature, we did get a few questions in advance via the initial invite for this event. So I'm going to go ahead and start there. The first one is, our students are in different countries. Any suggestions on how to fundraise with our student body in multiple cities and countries?
That's a challenge. I would say that many of the things we talked about, I'm not quite sure of the specifics. So what I'm sensing, or what I'm going to guess is, and then I'm going to talk about some other alternatives in case I'm wrong in my assumption. If you have maybe multiple campuses, then you can apply these types of things to your individual campuses. So for example, you could have your speaker series, or you could have your social events or whatnot, and you can apply that way. If not, let's say, for example, you have just a dispersed group for whatever reason. You could have a virtual speaker series where you could have a fundraising that way. You could also look at, if you are engaging your students across borders, then you must be engaging somehow technologically. And that makes it very appealing to reach out to the technology providers that provide those sorts of services, whether they are Google, whether they are Skype, whether they are Apple, and look at those types of providers, because they can very frequently be interested in sponsoring or, again, providing an in-kind donation to your organization in that way. In addition, take a look at your international aid organizations. If you have if you have multiple countries, frequently you can tap that, especially if you're doing philanthropic projects. And remember, it is completely legitimate for you to apply for grants and for aid and to charge up to a 10 or even 20% administrative charge on top of what it actually costs you to do whatever the programming is that you're doing for that grant or that funding. And that administrative charge can go to help seed the type of fundraising chapter that you have.
Okay. Great. The next one that came in via the online form is a little lengthy, so I'll kind of try to break it down into pieces. So I'll give you an opportunity to jump in as you need to, okay, Joshua? We've been trying to set up a bank account for our chapter on our campus. They've been asking for a tax ID number. Is this something AMSA can provide? If so, is the money still considered the chapters or AMSA's? And I can go into the specifics later.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about setting up a bank account. In order to set up a bank account, you're going to need to do one of two things. You're either going to apply for your bank account because you're going to set up as an organization and not as an individual bank account. Let me be very clear. Do not set up or take money to your individual bank account for the chapter, because money that comes in that way can be construed by the IRS as taxable income to you, and you are therefore going to be required to pay taxes on it. So don't do that. So when you set up your bank account for your AMSA chapter, okay, you're either going to set it up under the umbrella of the national organization, or you're going to have to apply for your own tax identification number with the IRS. Here's why you don't want to do the second. You don't want to set up your own tax identification number, because then you have to keep your own books and financial records. You have to provide financial statements to the IRS, and you have to complete what's called a Form 990 every year. And that's if you sign up as an association. If you sign up as a for-profit company, it gets even more complicated and you have to pay quarterly taxes. So you really don't want to do that, because then you have a lot of administrative work and you have a lot of financial management, and you put yourself on in the terms of liability for your funding that can be very serious if it's done wrong. So instead, my encouragement is to use our tax identification number, which you can do, and you will be under our umbrella. In order to do that, you need to have myself set up as one of the signers on the bank account. And the reason for that is that way when the transition happens from one year to the next, from one leadership team to the next, there is always somebody who can access the bank account and make that transition happen when, for example, you realize, oh my God, it's been 3 months, we didn't change over the signatories, and everybody has moved to different states. Now, I'd also like to just briefly touch on the nonprofit status. So when you gather money from different fundraising efforts and activities, if you have a check coming in and you've set up your bank account through the national organization, if that check is over $250, it really needs to come into the national office. So the check needs to be written to and sent to the national office, and then just have them earmark it, like in the memo field of the check, have them write for X chapter. And then what we do is we take that in, we put it into what we call a pass-through account, and we write a check that will then go out to your chapter, and you'll get it. It will take a little bit longer. Now, if you need that funding right away, you call me, you tell me when it's coming, you send me a photocopy of the check, and I just run it through as if we had received it, but you can just take the check and deposit it directly. That will be just fine. If it's under $250, you can just send me a photocopy of the check, and that is also just fine. The reason why the $250 mark matters is because that is the amount at which we need to send out a letter, as we do, that documents to the IRS that we have received funds from an organization. Now, the next step of that is going to be nonprofit status or tax-exempt status. Let me be very clear. We are not tax-exempt. You cannot walk into a store and not pay sales tax the way a church or other charity or tax-exempt organization can. We are not that kind of nonprofit. In addition, AMSA, the association, is not a tax-deductible IRS nonprofit organization. As the association is set up, grants and donations to us are not tax-deductible. However, what we can do is we can take any donation that is given to you, run it through the foundation, the AMSA Foundation, in much the same way that we do for that I just explained for the association. The check gets made out to the AMSA Foundation. It is earmarked for use for X chapter. The foundation receives it, the foundation notes it in our financial statements, and the foundation sends the money out to the chapter. Now, in this specific case, I do have to request that the checks actually do come into the national office to be processed. But the good news is anybody who does that can then write off that donation on their taxes. So if you have a firm, the school, your friends and family, outside donors, alumni who want to give back but who also want to have that tax deduction, then have them send it into the foundation and just have them write on the check for your chapter. And we will make sure that that funding comes through and gets through directly to you. Noreen, were there other aspects of that question that I might have missed?
They kind of talked about the paperwork that needs to be completed each year, and are there any fees?
Okay. Better than to take a lot of time walking through that verbally, I will put up that type of documentation and the processes that I just explained on the website in the fundraising area that we'll have set up.
That would be great. I have two more. We'll see if we can get through both of them, but I'll ask this one first since we only have 2 minutes left. How far in advance should a chapter begin fundraising for an event or trip to a conference like our annual convention, AMSA's annual convention?
Great question. I would try and start a year in advance. That's not really going to be practical because of the nature of our members and how they interact. If you can, though, that would be great. I think 6 months is excellent. 3 months is absolutely a minimum. You really need to get on it at least 3 months out. Sometimes, though, it's going to be 3 days and you're going to have to just rush.
Okay. This will be the last one, I believe. These fundraising ideas are great. How would you recommend that chapters transition information about fundraising each year so the chapter can keep developing relationships with organizations or people who have donated in the past?
So I would keep an Excel sheet or a Google spreadsheet up online. You're probably using Google Drive and Google Apps now because they're free and they're really valuable. Make a list of people who have given to you, how much they gave to you, what you did with that money, and when you said thank you. And that way, and who most importantly, who your contact person was. In that same list, perhaps on a different tab, are all the people you asked for money who said no, because you'll want to ask them again next year. And then keep a third tab for the people who said no and really meant it. Because at some point, some people are going to be obnoxious and going to say, don't ask me for money anymore. Okay, take them off the list and have a third tab. I think that is a really good and simple way to be able to transition that. What I would also do is I would encourage you, if you have a fundraising technique or an event that worked really well to get funds on your campus, do a quick one-page write-up for us at the national office and send it over to us. We'll put it on the website, and what my goal is to create a resource center with lists of all these types of activities from various chapters that worked.
Great. All right, I don't see any more questions, but it is 9 o'clock, so I think we're wrapping up just in time. I wanted to, again, reiterate, feel free to contact either myself or Joshua if you have any questions about fundraising, finances, anything at all. With that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our town hall session. I'd like to thank Joshua for sharing the do's and don'ts and generating some conversation about that. And I'd also like to thank everybody for joining us. Best of luck with your fundraising and have a great evening.